Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the first session of the Global Stewardship Playbook. I'm Oscar from Soft Plastic Stewardship Australia, and I want to start by thanking all of you for joining us, especially our speakers, Joachim and Robbie. They're both joining us live from Europe, and it's late at night for Robbie and actually a holiday time for Joachim, so it makes their contribution even more generous. So thank you both sincerely. So this 7-part series is hosted by SPSA in partnership with the Packaging Forum. So we've got Craig here, One Planet Consulting. So we've got Helen here and APCO. We've got a few from APCO, so welcome. Each webinar brings leading experts from the UK and Europe to share prudent strategies and effective product stewardship. These are the systems and policies and partnerships that are going to turn circular economy goals into real-world outcomes. Today's session, 10 Golden Rules for Effective Product Stewardship, is going to set the foundation for the series. We're going to explore key ingredients of strong stewardship systems, how producer responsibility organizations, PROs, are structured, how they interact with government, industry, public, what separates successful schemes from those that struggle. And we're going to begin with an introduction from Barry Cozier, our CEO, who will share why these insights matter so much for the future of soft plastic stewardship here in Australia and in New Zealand. Helen's then going to give us some quick context from her time in Europe. So she's been back now a couple of months, but she spent 6 months there, which is how she knows all these amazing people. And she's going to share the lessons she's learned and why we've invited these speakers. And after that, we'll hear from Joachim, who's the CEO of EXPRA. His well-known 10 Golden Rules is going to be the subject of this session. He'll then be followed by Robbie Staniforth, who's the Director of Policy and Innovation at Ecosurety UK. He'll unpack the UK's evolving system, its successes, its complexities, and some of the pitfalls that we can avoid here in Australia and New Zealand. After the presentation, we'll move into a live Q&A. So if you'd like to ask a question, just type it into the chat at any time. At the end, I'll direct your questions to the right speaker once the presentation wraps up, and obviously if time's permitting. We're going to only record the formal part of the webinar, so just when the speakers are on. Once that's over, we're going to stop the recording so you can ask your toughest questions freely without being quoted later. Don't want anybody to be embarrassed to ask those tough questions. So we've got a big hour ahead. Thank you all. This is an important discussion, and with that, I'm going to hand over to Barry, our CEO of Soft Plastic Stewardship Australia, to open the session.
Morning, everyone, and thanks for your time and joining us today. Just want to echo a few of the points Oscar's already called out. So big thank you to Joachim and Robbie, nearing midnight on the other side of the planet. So really big thank you. Our introduction to both Joachim and Robbie was probably 4 or 5 years ago when we started on the what was then the NPRS, and this subsequently merged with the retailer Soft Plastics Task Force to become Soft Plastic Stewardship Australia. The guidance we were able to get from the UK and Europe from 30 years of product stewardship and 30-odd schemes has really helped us to design a scheme that should be effective and efficient and meet the needs of the local market. So I won't say a lot more other than to introduce Helen Millison. Most people on the call will know Helen. Helen seems to know everyone now on this side of the planet and the other after her time in Europe. So as Oscar said, please put questions in the chat function as we go through, and we want to keep the presentations quite short and brisk so we can get to Q&A. So please put your questions in as you go, and I'll hand off to Helen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Barry, and hello everyone on the call. Clearly, we have touched a nerve with so many people opting to join this seminar series, and today in particular. Australia and New Zealand, we're on the cusp of change with EPR generally and with plastic packaging. And it's up to us collectively to be on this journey if we want to move forward to adopt better EPR schemes for these countries. It is complex It's slow and expensive at the moment to adopt extended producer responsibility, more expensive and it's difficult than it should be. And hopefully, as a result of the series that you will join us on, we will be more collectively informed and ready for the future. As Barry and Oscar said, I was fortunate to spend 6 months in Europe earlier this year, working part-time while there and being on various board roles, and have a deep dive into EPR, procurement, regulations, and various areas that we need to dive into this country, including repair, all those new frontiers that we must engage on. The speakers that you will hear from over the 7 sessions are outstanding. They are clear, they're articulate and have deep experience. Not all of them are as well known as Robbie and Joachim, but I have selected people that I believe will help us make our movements forward in key areas that we need to address. So I'm going to share some slides and please tell me if you can see them. Here we go. Does that work? Great. Okay. So firstly, what's astonishing is no one in Europe, no one, thinks that the plastic market and supply chain is a level playing field and fair. Everyone, whether they're in industry or government, knows that it is a highly manipulated area which needs intervention either through regulation or economic instruments. They don't pretend that it is, and so their world and what they do to work and collaborate together is based on that understanding. And this is proof to some extent. This shows how over time the price, I'm showing you here PET, not polyethylenes, has related to both the price of virgin and also recycled content. And I do believe that it's no accident that the two have correlated very closely together through up until the time in April 2018, when the European Commission released its plastics strategy for a circular economy. And you can see how it diverged significantly when major manufacturers of resin decided to depart this line and really maintain their market share. Demand for recycled content went up, price went up for recycled content, and you can see that this has really shadowed quite significantly the price differential. And why is this so? Well, and what impact has it had? Not so much, because Europeans have maintained a course and have been determined to recover significant quantities of plastic packaging and also to have recycled content and recycling in their communities. How particularly this is evident, you can see that this is the recycling rate, i.e. what is going in the gate of a reprocessor in, for example, Italy and Belgium, and the average throughout Europe is over 40%. And here I have shown for you what is Australia's recovery, i.e. what we are collecting of plastic packaging, which is 20%. So the difference between collection and reprocessing is astronomical. And why is this so? It is predominantly because in Europe, they have mainstreamed various practices which have meant that it is easy for them to achieve those targets. In this particular piece of work that I did with RMIT and Arcadis back in 2022 for the Australian government, and the report link is here, Australia has succeeded very well in various voluntary measures. So we have supported innovators such as SPSA with grants and awards. We have established the early adopters with some policies and pledges and targets. However, we have not made it past the tipping point, and we will fail to move past the tipping point until, like in Europe and other jurisdictions in Canada and elsewhere, you adopt stewardship schemes which are mainstreaming mandatory, where you have procurement schemes and industry sector-wide schemes and standards. So until we go past and adopt these sorts of measures, we will not succeed in going past the tipping point and seeing the kind of results that other countries enjoy. In terms of EPR, diving into that, extremely popular overseas in other jurisdictions. This is somewhat old data, but you can see how EPR adoption is on the increase, substantially so, and they are widely applied in a whole wide range of sectors, not just in packaging, but also in electronics, tyres, vehicles, autos, batteries, etc. And what are the impacts of PROs? PROs do make a measurable difference. So, for example, I've picked a country, not one of the most significant leaders in Europe for this graph, but to show that even in France, the French have succeeded with their packaging rates as a result of implementing stewardship schemes. That's their overall recycling rate and recovery rate for packaging, and this is the plastics. So their recycling rate exceeds our collection rate in France alone. So what are stewardship schemes? Stewardship schemes here in Australia, they're voluntary, but in other jurisdictions, it is mandatory according to law passed by the national governments for brands to take responsibility either through take back of their own material or to join a scheme. What we have is a balancing act. PROs are like a conductor of an orchestra or a cog in a wheel. They have to balance public benefit with the levies that they obtain from their members to pay for services, but they can't spend so much on services that they bankrupt their organisation. It is a fine balance between government's needs and public needs and what the PRO can provide through its levies that provides for the services that those countries enjoy. So my top observations, and you will hear them today, EPR schemes are a key contributor to a circular low emissions future. They do vary to each country in order to suit that country and the product. They grow from a fledgling and they don't stop evolving. So what you see now is not what was around in Europe 30 years ago when they were established. The best ones are not-for-profit PROs working for public purpose. The best are those where there's a single scheme, not a competing scheme, which coordinates the orchestra in priority defined product categories, where there is legislation which requires the producers to take that back their own material or join a scheme by a fixed date, and that the regulator has delegated authority representing state and federal governments to approve, supervise and discipline PROs and producers and the levies and the level of service. So with that, that's my presentation, and I really look forward to hearing from Joachim. Joachim will be next. Joachim, if you want to bring up your screen. Joachim is a lawyer. He has worked, like myself, in government. He has worked, like myself, for industry associations such as PRO Europe. I'll stop sharing my screen, thank you. And he has been the CEO of EXPRA, or the Managing Director of EXPRA, for now 12 years. It's a tiny team and a global network of packaging PROs. And it is wonderful that SPSA and New Zealand are both members. So over to you, Joachim.
Thanks a lot, dear Helen. I hope you can hear me loud and clear and see my presentation. Super. Thanks a lot for inviting me, and I would like first to send best wishes from Barcelona. I have the pleasure to be at a very lovely place, 26 degrees. Sun was shining the whole day. This in the end of October, fabulous. And sending greetings from a conference. Packaging and Sustainability, the second biggest conference in Europe every year. 600 people are here in person. So I think that says it all. So even after 30 years of packaging waste management, EPR, there's always enough to discuss and to explore and to develop to become better and better, because EPR is just a part of the big game. So it is not only, as I will try to explain, putting money from A to B. It's a whole system and a whole universe with so many actors, so many stakeholders, and everyone is very important. I think that's we should not forget. It is not them or it's not us only. It is always we, and then we can make the difference. That is what I will try to explain as well from a good system. EXPRA, as Helen said, it's a club, a family of since 1 week. 35 PROs. The latest one is joining from South Africa. So you see that the virus of EPR has not only stayed in the European Union or in Europe, but is spreading all over the world with long-term members in Canada and very happily Australia and New Zealand as well. We are very proud of this, and I can only congratulate you because I think this is a smart way. Of course, my first contacts were 2 women, each of one of the countries, guiding the way, contacting us, learning. And I think that is the clever way. There are so many things that we
seem to have lost Joachim, so
Have we lost Joachim?
yeah,
Okay.
give him a minute to reconnect, and if not, we'll jump across to Robbie and circle back.
We can run his slides, which might be easier as well. I'll reach out to him.
Yeah. So I think what we'll do, Robbie, if you can just jump in, we'll run through yours, and we'll get Joachim back online.
Always happy to be a substitute for Joachim. It's an absolute pleasure. Let me see if I can get my get my slides up for you folks. I enjoyed putting this presentation together, mostly because I could put tomorrow's date on it. I'm actually on the 21st of October here in the UK. Hopefully you're starting to see my slides now. Can you just let me know, Barry, you can see them okay? Yeah. So I'll just go through and take up sort of 10 minutes of your time, and hopefully in that intervening time we'll have Joachim back and he can set more context for Europe. The brief given to me by Helen and Barry was to outline what effective product stewardship looks like in the UK. And it has been, as has already been commented, a slow and long evolution to get where we are today. And I'm going to put down some building blocks of what's happened in the UK recently over the last sort of 3 to 5 years, so that you can contextually see, as also was mentioned in the intro, some of the do's and don'ts of how you stand up such a steward scheme as the SPSA, and how you bring it to become a mandated and regulated regime. Just before I move on, I think the first thing to say is that it's great that industry has managed to come together in advance of legislation. And I'll come back to that a little bit later on in my presentation, because that's one thing we didn't get right in the UK over the last 3 to 5 years. So the first thing, oops, sorry, make sure I don't flick through too many slides. The first one to go through is to say that, yes, the UK has had producer responsibility for 30 odd years. We were members of the EU at the time. We took an EU directive that said we needed to take more responsibility for packaging as a nation, and we made it into UK law. However, what we did very differently to the rest of Europe, and Joachim will fill us in a little bit later, I'm sure, is we introduced a market-based mechanism that didn't cover the full cost of recycling, collecting it from people's homes, sorting it A from B from C in terms of different material types, and then finally sending it to be reprocessed. We just had quite simply a system that traded evidence notes at the end point of recycling. And what that meant was the system that we started with wasn't extended producer responsibility. It was just some producer responsibility, not the full extension of all of the end-of-life costs of packaging that they place onto the market. So actually for the UK, EPR, the extended version of producer responsibility, only really started in 2024 with some reporting, and the first invoices are actually due to be issued and just have been issued in this last week. So after years and years of other European countries doing it for a long term now, the UK is only just catching up. And the reason for that is that we had this old, very complicated market-based system. But what we now have is a regulatory mechanism that's used to ensure that we pay for these full costs. And I'll explain those full costs in a second. We also have the tool in the arsenal of modulated fees that ensure people pay different costs based on how easily recyclable materials are. However, this often gets confused with recycled content being in the packaging that they place onto the market. That doesn't form part of EPR modulated fees for the UK. We have a separate plastic packaging tax, and I'll come on in a second to talk about my thoughts on an analysis on the plastic packaging tax. But effectively, it's a separate mechanism. It's run by, it's audited by Revenue and Customs. It's administered by His Majesty's Treasury, a government department in the UK, and it sits very, very distinctly separately from any other environmental legislation in the UK. And so it's a tax that's applied to any packaging item that's got less than 30% recycled content on it. So it's very specific also to plastic packaging, not all packaging, which is what's affected by extended producer responsibility. So a complicated chart. By the way, I've only got 3 slides, so don't worry. This isn't going to be death by PowerPoint from me at this late hour in the evening. But this is such an important chart for you to get your heads around, because what happens in the UK is we have obligated organisations in the green box there who are submitting data of what they place onto the market. So that's brands effectively telling the government, this is what packaging we sell, this is how much plastics we put onto the market. However, that information splits off and goes 2 different and quite convoluted and complex ways. The first is to compliance schemes such as Ecosurety. There are other compliance schemes. There's about 20 in the UK. It's quite a muddle. Now, that means that compliance schemes like Ecosurety help purchase these recycling notes, these packaging recycling notes, PRNs, as you can see there. It's abbreviated. And that's what helps producers of packaging, in the case we're talking today, soft plastics. It helps those producers show that they've taken responsibility for the very end of the process when the packaging gets recycled. What it never has done is prove that they had responsibility for all of the collecting, running the bin lorries around the country to pick up people's waste, getting it to sorting facilities, getting it pre-processed into different types of plastics, and then finally reprocessed. And that's what we've introduced in the last couple of years on the left-hand side of this diagram. And as I mentioned earlier, industry wasn't forward thinking enough to get itself together to create a producer responsibility organisation in advance of this legislation. So the government, as you can see, the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, act as the scheme administrator. So this is a government-run scheme administrator, not a producer responsibility organisation that's not for profit, led by producers. It is a government-run new department, and that's titled PAC UK. And so I sat on the board for PAC UK and helped them to stand up this organisation to manage the calculation of how much producers should pay for the household packaging, just the household bit of the soft plastics that they place onto the market, and then help them with invoicing engines, get the invoices out, which have just been sent in the last week. And then when the money comes in, distribute that money to local authorities who run the collection rounds and sort the recycling before it then ends up on the right-hand side of this chart. Now, in tandem with some of that complexity we've got going on, I can see Helen nearly tearing her hair out. We also have two other regulatory drivers going on. I mentioned the plastic packaging tax. That sits outside and totally distinct from any extended producer responsibility. To put it plainly, that was a mistake. And what it means is the tax doesn't sort out any more recycling of plastic. All it does is it's a tax. It goes into general taxation. None of it is hypothecated to be used to build plastic recycling facilities and some of the noble ventures that SPSA are trying to stand up. It's literally just goes into the coffers like any income tax or your local rates would. The second thing is simpler recycling. That is standardizing the collections that you can get from anywhere in the UK. So it's a separate piece of legislation, but it's vitally important because unless you mandate that soft plastics are collected from people's homes, it's very hard to drive the volume. So that's one of the things we did right in terms of having policy working in tandem. In 2027, I should say, we will mandate that every home gets a collection at the doorstep, because we have mostly curbside collections in the UK of soft plastics. Right, final substantive slide. Thanks for staying with me. Hope we've got Joachim back for a second. So to summarize, these invoices have gone out to producers in the UK, and let's make no bones about it, they are higher fees than they've ever seen before. Some of them tenfold higher than what they've ever paid historically. And that has stimulated action already to make better and more recyclable packaging and use less packaging where it's not needed. So that is a good thing. However, PAC UK, this new government department, have taken on a burden that's usually given to producers who put together a not-for-profit organization, a PRO, as we're coming to learn through this session today, to take care of all of the things that government is now having to do. And to be frank, sort of don't really want to do it, but someone has to do it, and they've written a law, so it's ended up being them. We're now going through a process, and we don't have time to go into it today, where PAC UK will be trying to delegate authority to a PRO. Like retrospectively, we're trying to do what you are proactively doing in the process of doing in Australia at the moment. So I would not recommend going for a government run scheme. There's been too much focus on just transferring the costs. Currently, you get your bins picked up from out the front of all of your recycling through your council taxes and through your general taxation. Now it goes through this extended producer responsibility funding, and all of the focus has been on that cost transferring to producers, and nothing has been on actually having an efficient system stimulating those recycled content markets that Helen mentioned in her intro, and building infrastructure to actually reprocess more plastics. So what this means is there is some strategic oversight from PAC UK, but only a very small fragment, not nearly enough that a producer responsibility organisation would have. And that's because there's so much ambiguity in the system design. I think I'll leave any further commentary on the plastic packaging tax there for now, but just to say it doesn't really solve the problem of plastics would be my headline on that one. Thanks very much, folks, for listening. Look forward to the Q&A, and hopefully we've got Joachim back.
We do, and thank you so much, Robbie. I didn't get to introduce Robbie because we jumped straight in, but Robbie has had a long time working both with brands and with industry groups and also in government. So we do have Joachim back, and I would suggest, oh, there you go, lots of applause, Robbie.
Can you hear me?
We can, and perhaps if it's possible for Gabby to run your slides for you, Joachim, just in case, given that your connection is a
just
little...
to be safe.
Yes. Is that
Yeah.
possible, Gabby? Can you do
Yes.
that for us?
I'm doing it, and Joachim,
Oscar's doing
just let me know.
Yeah.
Just say next
Great.
slide when you're ready.
Yes, yes. And I think the good news for the UK is that the government has understood that they are falling short of some of their jobs. So at the moment they are selecting a PRO from industry. So they are on the way to a hybrid system, I would say, which is a good move. And we as EXPRA are trying to support British industry in this move. So hopefully not only collecting money, and you are, by the way, the most expensive system now in the world, I think. So congratulations for this. Do you show the slides, Oscar?
They're coming right now. This is where you
There we
left
go.
off.
Yeah, yes,
Good. Next slide.
we can go on, please. Yeah, next slide, and even more. So I think go on. It is clear EPR is a responsibility on each company. I think this is important, and you can partly transfer the obligations to a collective entity, as it makes sense to collect the packaging together from our inhabitants and not each company of their own. But of course, certain responsibilities will stay with the company, like the important design for recycling obligation. That's not something a PRO can do. I think this is important to have in mind, and a difference somehow to a taxation system. There you sign a check, pay your tax, and you are free. In EPR, you are always involved somehow, something in the positive way as well. So it's not a negative responsibility, I would say. Please go on, perhaps a little bit further. Go on, so that we can one more, that we can concentrate on the most important things. So EPR is a concept. I'm not able to send you a 200 pages business plan or a franchise system and you know exactly what to do. On the other side, the great thing is you can adapt the concept to your needs. No one expected it. As you can see, I was criticized a lot for this mess of a slide, but it's just a picture of the reality. So it is a picture from different perspectives how EPR is implemented in several countries. And everything is possible with one system, with 40 system, with a deposit system for beverages, without, especially for households, especially for commercial, full cost, shared cost, part cost, incentive cost. As I said, everything is possible, which is a nightmare for companies making business with several countries, but of course, a paradise for consultants. That's all the green jobs the European Commission has promised to European industry. But we had something different in mind, I think. Please go on. Next one. Helen already showed it. Some countries are leading, some countries are far behind. For example, unfortunately, also our French friends. So organized countries from your mind, not so organized countries. It has a lot to do with the different governance models. That's one of the learnings. I will come to this later. So you always have to look behind the recycling rates also to really understand the performance of each country. Go on. My role model is Italy, also a country. I don't know whether this came until Australia and New Zealand, but in the 80s, for example, Italy was the synonym for a broken waste management system fully in the hands of the mafia. That was the Italian image. And you can really see here efforts of industry together with municipalities. That is, for me, the unique thing in Italy. Municipalities and industries going hand in hand together, building a system for Italy, taking into account the needs of each region. So I think these are important features. Of course, they did not love each other all the time. And of course, there were a lot of discussions, but they always went hand in hand. And I think this is perhaps something we should always have in mind, that it is not only one stakeholder who is the most important one, or who can dictate the way forward. So in the end, we need the support of all the stakeholders. And then you see such a development going from below 10% plastic recycling to nearly or to 50% within 25 years. And I think this is really a lot of success. And the 25% recycling rate are measured within the recycling plant in front of the extruder. So it is even more than sorted out. So I think this is important to understand as well. Next slide. Another role model which shows the power of a good PRO. Belgium. Don't tell it to the Belgians, but they are really a role model for this as well. In the end of the 10s, they noticed they cannot continue with their approach of EPR because they only collected from the plastics what is valuable. So bottles and some rigid flakes. At a certain moment, they said we have to collect all the packaging. And this was, again, a co-decision of industry, municipalities, and the government. So again, instead of fighting all the time, they tried to come up with solutions. I think this is extremely important as well. So they extended the collection to all plastics, especially to soft plastics. So if you suddenly collect more material, your sorting plants will say, oh my God, what shall we do with this material? We are not able to treat it. So they said, we need new sorting plants. They called for tender. They offered the waste management sector a 9-year contract with a guaranteed input material and a guaranteed payment somehow, which also takes into account the fluctuating prices and so on. And you cannot believe how many waste management companies wanted to sign this contract and to build a sorting center for the system, because such a contract is bankable, as I learned. When you produce new sorting fractions, then of course you run into the next problem. You need recyclers which are able to eat this material. So they again did this exercise. They called for tender for 5 new recycling plants in Belgium, which are able to eat, for example, flexible packaging, which are able to eat trays and so on. It worked again. Bankable contracts, so the waste management industry were able to invest. So within 5 years, they invested €1 billion, which is now paid over the years by the EPR fees. So not at once, but year by year. For a country of 11 million inhabitants. I think this is something. And now, as you saw, they're at the top of the development. So a good PRO can really boost the circular economy, the recycling of packaging in a country. Go on. Next slide. Yeah, they sort in the meantime 16 different fractions, just to imagine this. When in a few years ago you had a good sorting plant when you were able to sort out 5 or 6 different kinds of plastic packaging. Go on. So we come now finally to the learning, but I think you need to understand the background to believe me what I'm saying. What could we learn? Please go on. We have these golden rules, as we found it out, agreed and developed by all our members, analyzing what they did. And the most important thing is somehow, unfortunately, with the government, because they have to outline the roles and responsibilities of each actor in a clear way. And you cannot imagine, it seems this is a very difficult job to describe in short words, in paragraphs, in legal wording, what is the role of the producers, of the manufacturers, of the municipalities, of the waste management companies, and so on. Because as soon as you have a hole in your roles, you have a problem. And if you have overlapping roles, then you have a problem as well. Then start the discussion, who is responsible for what and so on. And this is always a waste of time and money. We think that the ownership with the system should be with those who are paying the bill. So like who's paying the music is usually allowed to choose the songs. Of course, you have to take into account the audience, because otherwise you will dance alone, which does not make fun. But you have always the right to choose the music. And by this, you avoid a conflict of interest, because if those who are receiving money are deciding how the money is spent, conflict of interest, usually very expensive system. Not for profit set up. From my point of view, yes, of course, because you do a public interest. The head should not make money. The head should think in the best way how to set up and run the system. The arms and the legs, the sorting plants, the collectors, the recyclers, they should make money. That's their job. That's their business, but not from the guiding, from the steering. Equal treatment of producers. I take one which I think is important as well, because you see it in some countries with a competitive approach. If you put the same packaging on the market, you should pay the same fees. So not the big guys pay less than the small guys, because the environmental costs, the costs for collection, sorting, and recycling are the same for the same packaging. I think this is an important principles as well. And transparency. Only if the inhabitants understand what is happening with their packaging, they will do the extra step to do the sorting at home in the right way. Only if the industry knows that the money is spent in the right way, they will not try to escape the system. And. So transparency is one of the most important things. And this will help in the next step to cost efficiency, because if you understand the system, you understand the weaknesses, and then you can work on the weaknesses. So everything is then connected with each other. Going to the next slide. Just to say, this is not just what EXPRA is thinking. You can even find these learnings, these golden rules, very much in Article 8A of the Waste Framework Directive, minimum requirements for EPR. So even the 27 European member states understood, yes, these are golden rules. Please apply them, because they really make sense. Next slide. And now I try to translate everything what I said into one slide. And again, I know it's a full slide, but if you look at it, perhaps you can understand this would be the circular economy for packaging or for any other goods, with the producer responsibility organization in the middle being the motor, the engine of this circle, of this wheel. And it is not only collecting money, the arrows in red, it is also understanding the system, because each part is very important. Nowadays, with design for recycling, circular economy, even if you use the wrong glue or the wrong adhesive, this can break the whole system from the very beginning. So everyone is important. And so the PRO should understand who is doing what in the circle and how the stakeholders could improve their work with our help, with our guidance. So that's one of the most important jobs, in a kind but straight way, to all the stakeholders, to tell them, let's try to make our circle more circle. Like with cycling, if the wheel is round, it's easier to cycle as if you have edges. And if there's no air, there's no cycling. So it is similar with our circular economy, with our packaging circle. And that's, for me, the important job of a producer responsibility organization. Next slide, last slide. I think, of course, we have countries with more than one PRO. We have to accept the reality. But just think how complex it is if you have 5, 6, up to 10 and more PROs all trying to be the engine, the motor of the circle. If the speed is in different ways, you have a problem. If the direction is different, you really have a bigger problem. So how to align for your country, for the whole approach, different PROs. We see that it is extremely difficult. You have to put a lot of extra layers on it to make it somehow working. The question is now, why should you do these extra efforts and so on when you have a proven solution which is working? I think that was my contribution. We are always happy to share our expertise and so on, not only today, but in the future as well. Please ask us, please go via our contacts, via Lynn and Helen in the countries, and we will try to help. But always have in mind, we are only 3 persons in EXPRA, and the day has only 24 hours, even in Europe. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joachim. These slides will be available to people in coming days. Thank you so much. I think people probably have gathered how complex the UK system is. As Joachim has said, it is the most expensive, unfortunately. And obviously that is something we want to avoid for Australia and New Zealand as we move forward. So without further ado, I think it's probably appropriate to go back to those key points to say that a single PRO, which is established for a particular sector, which has not-for-profit status, which is like a conductor of an orchestra or a cog in a wheel, is really the best way for us to go. Over coming sessions, we will go into more detail around particular things. Our next session, which will be on the 5th of November, details of which are available online, will be featuring indeed FOSS Plus. We will have Katrine Mentien, who's the head of account management at FOSS Plus, who will talk about how they plan and work with their members and councils and processes on expanding collections and supplying back into the Belgian market. And Piet Koopman, who is the regional coordinator for one of the regional government industry bodies on collections contracts and regions under PRO and local government service providers. So I think I'll probably leave it there. And Barry, you want to do a summation and then we'll hand over to questions and answers?
Yes, well, actually, yeah, I think without repeating too much of what Helen said, is really clear to me that EPRs can be complex, but they can also be extremely effective. Yes. And the key to that is collaboration between the supply chain and government and all levels. The other thing that's really clear to me is that EPR needs to address the local needs and issues. So account for the legacy systems that are in each country and build around them and build to improve them. And I think Robbie's pointed out the system in the UK went through several steps to get to a point, but still isn't actually addressing some of the market failures. So that's something in SPSA we're really keen to do. Our premise is address that market failure, make money from the brands, invest in the supply chain, similar to Belgium with long-term contracts. And my final learning is Australia, I guess the government and PROs, APCO, all of us are very lucky to have 30 years of experience as examples for us. We've got 30 countries, over 30 countries to draw from, good and bad, and it's up to us now to, I guess, learn from that and move forward. So there's lots of questions in the question and answer and the chat function. So Oscar's going to run through those and sort of direct those to the relevant speaker. So if you've got any questions, put it in there and we'll try and address multiple questions and group the themes together.